Hi, this is Joshua Kulp of Daf Shevui from the Conservative Yeshiva. We are doing today Daf Tzadi Gimmel, page 93 of Masechet Ketubot. I thought that what I would do in this video is go through the simple reading of the Mishnah that begins off this daf as a little bit of a review. And maybe at the outset talk about why the Talmud doesn't interpret the Mishnah in the simple manner. First of all, a little story. I remember a number of years ago, I was studying this Mishnah, and I read through Albeck's explanation, which is based on Rav Sadia Gaon's explanation. Rav Sadia Gaon was a Gaon in Babylonia, one of the leaders of the Babylonian Jewish community, and he was an expert in science and mathematics, was a very worldly person, and it gave this Mishnah a very simple, relatively straightforward, not simple maybe, but a relatively straightforward, satisfactory explanation that didn't agree with the Gemara's explanation. And that says something a little bit about the Geonim. The Geonim were willing to interpret Mishnayot against their interpretation in the Bavli. They had a quasi-scientific outlook on the development of sources, and were willing to believe that there was a simple reading to a source, and that source was misunderstood by later rabbis, which is a little radical and is not something that later rabbis, specifically Ashkenazi rabbis, were all that willing to do. It may be that the Rambam, maybe the Rif, early Spanish Sephardi authorities, were willing to read the Mishnah against the Talmud, but I don't believe that you'll find that phenomenon, at least not find that phenomenon very often among Ashkenazi writers who tend to believe that saying that a Mishnah means something else besides what the Bavli understood it as would be akin to heresy. Nevertheless, Rav Sadia Gaon gave this Perush to the Mishnah, which was adopted by Albeck, which is a modern critical commentary on the Mishnah. But a number of years ago, I was reading a Parshat HaShavua sheet from Bar Ilan University, and a Nobel Prize winner by the name of Yisrael Oman, who had won the Nobel Prize in game theory from Hebrew University, gave an explanation to this Mishnah, and he basically gave the same explanation that Albeck and Sadia Gaon had given, except he came up with this Mishnah on his own. After all, he's a mathematician and an expert in game theory, and he but he was able to decipher the Mishnah on his own, despite the Bavli's interpretation. Professor Oman is a religious Jew, so he knew the Talmud, I assume, but he thought that he had an explanation that worked better than the Talmud. He was not a Talmudic scholar, or a modern Talmudic scholar, so he did not know that he was not the first to give that explanation, that it had been given 1,000 years earlier by one of the most respected mathematicians in Jewish history, Rav Sadia Gaon, and I'm sure once somebody alerted him to that, I'm sure he was quite proud of the fact that he and the Gaon had the same thought about this Mishnah. But the Mishnah, basically, let's take the example, if there's just for one short example, part of it, if there is 3 women, one whose Ketubot is 300, one 200, and 100, if there are only 200 zuz left. So as I said in my explanation, which you can look over, the first 100 is subject to all 3 Ketubot. So they divide that one equally, each woman theoretically would get 33 and a third. The second 100, right, meaning the 100 to 200, is subject not to all of the Ketubot, but only to the second and third ones, in which case everybody gets their own percentage of that money, which would give another 16 or so to the first woman, bringing her up to 50. And there would be 150 left, and each of the women of the 200 and the 300 would divide that up so that they would get 150. If there are 300 left, right, they all divide according to their percentages. The first one would take 1/5, which is 50. The second woman, who would take 1/6, her ketubah is 200, so she would take a third, which is 100. And the third woman would take 150 zuz, which is 1/2. And it also happens to work out that in each of these scenarios, each woman takes a half of her ketubah. So you can look it over. The Gemara, I can't tell you exactly why, but the Gemara does not give that explanation. The Gemara gives explanation, I would say, is al derech ha'okimta, meaning provides strange contexts in which the Mishnah is understandable, because the Gemara basically does not understand the simple mathematics behind the Mishnah, so it has to find certain particular scenarios, and that you can read about in my commentary on Daf Shevui.